Welcome, ladies and gents. Chris Andre here. You can find me at BetBoxing on Twitter. Of course, you can subscribe to the channel. Let's talk boxing. You know, a fight that I've really been looking forward to this summer is Anthony Joshua against Dillian Whyte. I feel that the decline of Dillian Whyte has been greatly exaggerated, and so I was really looking forward to this, but it looks as though the fight is on the ropes and may not get over the line. Now, I'm remaining positive and optimistic. I actually do think it will be announced in the next 24 to 48 hours. But if that's the case, I think it will be because Dillian Whyte makes yet another concession. And this got me thinking about the way in which various A-sides operate when it comes to negotiations. And the truth is, and a lot of people are not going to like this, but the way in which Anthony Joshua operates, or Team AJ, whether you want to call that his management team, whether you want to call it Eddie Hearn, AJ himself, the way in which he operates is actually not too dissimilar to the way Tyson Fury operates. And the Fury fans are not going to like me saying this because they feel as though Tyson Fury has been subjected to an unfair witch hunt. And the AJ fans are not going to like it because they're going to say, how dare you compare Anthony Joshua to Tyson Fury? The truth is, I do see many similarities, and we're going to go into what those similarities are. But I'm also not just critical of these guys. I've been critical of Alexander Usyk when I felt that it was necessary. I've also been praising of all of these guys. But as you can also see from a video I put up a few days ago, I was very critical of Canelo Alvarez, again, for what I want to call A-side bullying. You expect A-sides to have certain advantages. That goes with the territory. However, they push boundaries to points where it starts to become unfair, or it starts to become an uneven playing field when you're talking about seeing a fight take place. A-sides are bound to get certain advantages. I mean, you had Andy Ruiz's father, for instance, complain today. You've even had Andy Ruiz's father say that Deontay Wilder is lying to the public and that actually he's been offered 30% in order to take the Wilder fight. A former world champion with a fairly significant Mexican fan base. His father feels that that is a ridiculous offer and that Andy Ruiz is not just some random name. But we're not just talking about the attempt at financial domination when we're talking about A-side bullying. I'm talking about the way in which Eddie Hearn has been conducting himself and the contradictions, although more slippery and more slick, they're still there. One example is an interview he gave with Ariel Helwani, where he spoke about not wanting to lock fighters in. This was only last week. He doesn't want to lock fighters into multi-fight deals, and that you really should want to roll the dice as a promoter because after all, that's what it's all about. And yet, after that, Dillian Whyte goes on to talk sport and he tells them that he's been offered a contract which would require him to be locked in, a contract which he did not expect to receive. He was expecting a simple contract. Take a listen to this.
The fight that makes most sense for Devin right now is Regis Prograis. But if I start trying to lock Devin into a 3 or 5 year deal, we might lose the Prograis fight.
I'd rather roll the dice on the Prograis fight.
What did he say? And people will say, yeah, Eddie, if you don't sign Regis, DAZN will lose the belt. So what? Let's have a little bit of fun. Roll the dice. I mean, isn't that what it's all about? It's not about locking people in. And you know, I know boxing's a chess move, but at the same time, sometimes you've got to put your balls on the line.
Go on, honey. Take a chance.
I think there's too much of that. Like, you know, trying to force a fighter to align with you in a multi-fight deal over 3 or 5 years. Like, those days, man, I don't.
Wait a minute. Wait a minute. You're not going to speed past that like you didn't just say what you just said.
Trying to force a fighter to align with you in a multi-fight deal over 3 or 5 years. Like, those days, man.
I don't always want the obligation. There may be a time where there's not the value in Devin Haney.
He said that we're going to send a simple contract, and then they send a very complicated contract with a lot of hooks in the contract to hook me in, and I don't want that. I just want a simple contract, simple fight. I want to move on.
I'm listening.
But now they're trying to put rematch clauses and stuff in there that ties me up for up to a year.
Those motherfuckers!
Now, in fairness to Eddie Hearn, he does mention 3 to 5 year deal. So maybe he feels it's acceptable to lock someone into a 3-fight deal, for instance, rather than a 3-year deal. Okay, maybe. But the essence of what he's saying is that he wants to roll the dice and he doesn't want having to lock fighters in to get in the way of making big fights. That's why he says he wants to roll the dice, and that Devin Haney, if you try to bring him into a contract, you might lose the Prograis fight. So why not make the fight instead? And yet, Dillian Whyte went on to talk sport, and he was talking about the fact that he did not expect to receive such a complex contract from Eddie Hearn, which required him to be hooked in, to be tied in. Hatman has a theory on his channel whereby he basically says that it could be a case of him not wanting to risk Whyte beating AJ and then not sticking with Eddie Hearn and sailing off into the sunset to go and fight with Ben Shalom, and then all of a sudden Hearn has missed that big cut with Saudi Arabia. Now, obviously, Hatman explains that he's just speculating there and we can't really know and so on and so forth. And it's true, we can't really know. And that does make sense. And I can understand why Eddie Hearn would look at DAZN's best interest when DAZN and Matchroom are in a bit of a precarious situation since Canelo Alvarez signed with the PBC. So it's not that I'm critical of that approach, but you also have to look at it from Dillian Whyte's perspective. And the fact of the matter is, you're talking about potential obstacles being put in the way of the fight occurring. First, you were talking about him receiving a certain purse that he was not happy with. So you're talking about him being lowballed. Then you're starting to talk about tying him in. But it goes beyond just that. I also want you to look at what Eddie Hearn has told IFL TV here.
Where are we at with AJ Whyte? He's got the contract. Obviously, I'm not expecting him to come back today. Won't be nice, but they need to review it and they need to come back really in 24, 48 hours. We've got 2 other fighters ready to go.
He said they've got the contract. It would be nice to have it back today, but I don't expect it back today. They need to come back to us in 24 to 48 hours. We've got another 2 fighters ready. So you've dropped your little veiled threat there of we've got 2 other fights ready. And then what have you done? You've given a deadline. Dillian Whyte was sent the contract on Friday at lunchtime. This video was put up by IFL TV on Sunday. That means you sent Dillian Whyte a contract he did not expect to receive. A much more complicated contract than he expected to receive, according to his own words, with attempts to tie him in. Then within 2 days, you're telling him you've got 24 to 48 hours, in other words, a deadline. You need to have it back to us because we've also got another couple of fighters ready to take the fight. How is that different to Tyson Fury setting Anthony Joshua a deadline back in December? People were saying the reason he's setting deadlines is because he doesn't really want to take the fight. Are we going to have the same energy now with Anthony Joshua and Dillian Whyte? Is this a case of them trying to rush him to sign because they don't feel that he will sign if he's rushed? What is going on here? Now, I've been challenged for bringing this up, and I want to address some of the challenges that have come my way on Twitter. And a lot of people repeated the same challenges. So rather than raise names, I'm just going to put challenge 1, challenge 2, and try and address them all. Challenge number 1. Fury called his deadline 3 months before the fight was due, whereas AJ's date is 6 weeks away. The insinuation here is that Anthony Joshua has to be bullish about the deadline and push because the fight is not far away. So if you're not going to take the fight, I need to find an alternative. I can't afford to be messed around right now. So hurry up and make a decision. But who has made this situation play out the way it has when it comes to these deadlines? In fact, before I respond to this first challenge, let me also read you the second challenge because they're linked. Fury was greedy with splits and changed the date and location for Usyk. AJ hasn't done that to Whyte. Now let's rewind and look at what actually happened here. Anthony Joshua was due to fight 3 times this year. He was due to fight Franklin, then Whyte in the summer, and then Deontay Wilder in the winter. And instead, after the Franklin fight, we saw Anthony Joshua come out and say on his Instagram story, "I'll see you all in December." This suggested that he was not going to be fighting in the summer. It drew major criticism. What is going on? He needs to be getting prepared and active and so on and so forth. The noise seemed to have an effect. And according to Eddie Hearn, Anthony Joshua instructed him that he does actually want to fight in the summer, and they renewed interest in the Dillian Whyte fight. Whilst they were renewing interest in that fight, a new offer came in from Tyson Fury. And the offer was, it's the same agreement we had in December, the same terms. The reason that it was turned down, according to Eddie Hearn, is that they were very far ahead in the negotiations with Dillian Whyte. They were very close to agreeing all personal terms and signing the contract, and they couldn't come off of that trajectory. They had plans, and they were then going to go on to fight Deontay Wilder in the winter. And people were critical of Fury. Tyson is just getting involved here to try and scupper these negotiations, to cause problems. He's not serious about taking the fight. He just wants to inject himself into the conversation because he knows they're about to sign the contract. Then Fury goes off and starts calling out everybody under the sun, from Opataya to John Jones, and the whole boring saga begins with Fury. But from the perspective of Dillian Whyte, we then expect him and AJ to announce the fight. Instead, Whyte comes out and says, they're lowballing me. Eddie Hearn comes out and says the fight now looks extremely unlikely. Dillian Whyte then reneges. The bluff was called, it seems, because Hearn starts talking about AJ fighting other guys. And now we're in a position whereby the contract also has other clauses involved in it. On top of that, when you talk about not changing the date, Dillian Whyte has been saying that he wants the fight in September. He's also been saying the reason for that is that you can make it in a stadium, and it's not in August when all the fans are away on holiday, families and so on and so forth. That means fewer people are purchasing tickets to the fight and fewer people are purchasing pay-per-views. So how could it have possibly have been that they were very close to signing the contract after advanced negotiations when they hadn't agreed the purse splits? Dillian Whyte clearly not happy with what he was earning there. The date hadn't been agreed. The location hadn't been agreed. A one-way rematch clause is in place, according to Dillian Whyte, which is a major stumbling block. What on earth are you talking? What did you agree? If those were the things you couldn't agree, what did you agree? The colour of the font on the fight poster? Who are you kidding, man? That's a massive lie told by Eddie Hearn. So now, when you consider that that lie was told, how do we now observe Tyson Fury's offer to fight Anthony Joshua? Are we going to say that AJ ducked Tyson Fury? And if so, are we also saying that he's trying to duck Dillian Whyte? How many obstacles is this? When Tyson Fury does these things against Usyk, we rightly, correctly say he's putting obstacles in the way of the fight being made. Why aren't we having the same energy when it comes to Team AJ? When Tyson Fury was talking about December the 3rd, AJ was talking about December 17th, right? And AJ accepted. He had to concede and accept the change in the date. The location, when it came to Fury's discussions with Alexander Usyk, moved from Saudi to London. Now, Whyte and AJ are practically from the same city. Watford is outside of London, but pretty much London, so to speak. It's the same sort of location, but a different venue. And the splits are different too. So aren't the obstacles being put in the way when you're also putting in one-way rematch clauses and ties in, hooks in to keep Whyte? Challenge number 3. Fury set the deadline so he could supposedly fight Usyk, but he didn't, and that's why he got criticised. No, this is not true. The criticism started way before the talks were reported to be at an impasse with time running out for a deal at the beginning of March. It was in September when Tyson Fury made the video to fight AJ and then set the deadline, and then he fought Derek Chisora by the end of the year and getting a whole heap of criticism for it. So no, it wasn't because of the Usyk situation. That came afterwards. He was additionally correctly criticised for that, as he was correctly criticised for picking Derek Chisora as the opponent for December, but he was also criticised for the negotiations with Anthony Joshua. Challenge number 4. Fury is a world champion and has duties. AJ isn't and can do what he wants. Now, to a degree, I actually agree with this. Anthony Joshua doesn't have an obligation to go and fight Dillian Whyte. In fact, if he goes and fights a bunch of puddings and he's not the world champ and he doesn't get a title shot as a result of fighting puddings, nobody can really complain. He can do what he wants in that regard. Whereas Tyson Fury, he will be held accountable if he doesn't fight Alexander Usyk. His legacy will be ruined. AJ's legacy is not going to be ruined in 10 years from now if he doesn't fight Dillian Whyte now. So from that perspective, I agree. However, AJ seems to want to not have the duties of a champion, but he wants the privileges of a champion. In other words, when you're talking about one-way rematch clauses and there's no belt on the line, this is not typical. You're talking about massive splits in your favour. Sure, you're the A side. You'd expect that even if you're not a champion. But then you're also talking about tying fighters into deals and rematch clauses, like I said, dictating dates and locations, and to not get criticised for it. That goes beyond what is just a typical A-side fighter. These are the privileges of a champion, which brings us on to challenge number 5. Whyte had a one-way rematch clause with Povetkin, so why shouldn't AJ have a one-way rematch clause against Dillian Whyte? Well, the difference is that Dillian Whyte was the WBC interim heavyweight champion of the world. Now, the interim belt is, of course, a secondary belt. Nonetheless, it guarantees you a shot at the full heavyweight championship. So it puts you in a mandatory position. So you've got a belt on the line with a shot at Tyson Fury to try and become the full heavyweight champion of the world. The AJ situation is different because you've got one guy without a belt fighting a second guy without a belt, and the winner will fight Deontay Wilder, who does not have a belt. It's simply a financial reward. And in addition to that, Povetkin was a massive B-side against Dillian Whyte. It was during lockdowns as well that the first fight happened. Who was buying pay-per-view for Alexander Povetkin? Nobody. They were all buying it because of Dillian Whyte. He was the revenue generator. The second fight, that occurred in Gibraltar. How many people can you tell me know the name of Alexander Povetkin in Gibraltar? So when it comes to who the A side is, it was quite clearly a massive difference between the two. Whereas now you're in a position where Anthony Joshua's sales were slower than expected, according to Eddie Hearn, for the Franklin fight. And you know that they've got history, these two. Dillian Whyte was a pay-per-view star in his own right. It's a big fight. Of course, Anthony Joshua is the significant A-side. But the point I'm making here is that Dillian Whyte is no mug. He's also got some star quality here in the UK. So when you're talking about the A-side bullying of Povetkin, it is different to an A-side bullying of Dillian Whyte. But in addition to that, as I've said, titles were on the line, as were shots for a world title. Very different scenarios. Now, should Dillian Whyte therefore concede again? Simon Jordan was saying during the Fury-Usyk negotiations, for a negotiation to work well, everybody has to leave the meeting having felt as though they gained something. In other words, let's look at it from a simplistic perspective and say that there are 3 possible levels for any given detail that you're negotiating on. Level number 1 means that you gained something from the other person. It favoured you. Level number 2, it didn't favour either of you. It was what was fair. It was a neutral outcome. Number 3 is a concession. You gave up something in order to make the negotiation happen. When it came to Alexander Usyk and Tyson Fury, Usyk was conceding on pretty much everything. When it then came down to that final split of what he wanted to demand for the rematch, he went for 70-30 in his favour. And that was asking for himself to gain something for the first time. He wasn't asking for something that was neutral. He wasn't willing to give a concession. It was him basically saying to Fury, you show goodwill now and you concede something because I've conceded everything. Fury was not willing, it seems, and Usyk walked away. Now, in this situation, we have something similar. So far, Dillian Whyte has conceded on everything. He was not happy with the money. He accepted it. He didn't seem to be happy with the date. We're going to see if he accepts that. Didn't seem to be happy with the location, i.e. he wants it in a stadium. We'll see if he accepts that. And he also doesn't seem to be happy with the one-way rematch clause. If he is going to concede on everything, then the fight will go ahead. If he doesn't concede on everything, then AJ will have to concede on something to make the fight happen. Otherwise, it's not going to happen. And if it doesn't, AJ would have conducted himself like Fury did when Fury was in negotiations with Usyk. I can't blame anybody for doing whatever it is that they're going to do in this situation. AJ may have more options and he might say, yep, I'm going to be the bully in there, and that's that. Dillian Whyte, on the other hand, if he walks away, just like Alexander Usyk, I will put it down to pride and I will understand why he did what he did. But if he wants to make the fight happen, he is going to have to concede. In summary, it is very possible that the demands of Anthony Joshua could scupper this fight. But a small portion would also have to be attributed to Dillian Whyte because it would mean that his pride got the better of him. Sure, you might not be able to go to the Saudi fight unless you beat AJ twice, but then you've still got a massive fight against Anthony Joshua. Having said that, from AJ's perspective, if Dillian Whyte does not bite the bait, if I was AJ, I would actually really contemplate making some sort of concession, even if it's just financial. Why? Because I think Dillian Whyte could offer a real psychological boost to Anthony Joshua. They've got beef, they've got history. AJ was left urinating blood after their first fight. He knows he's a tough guy. If he goes and knocks him out, he's going to get a massive boost of confidence ahead of a fight against Deontay Wilder. Whereas if he goes and fights a pudding, it's not going to prepare him well enough for a December fight against Wilder. To give you an analogy, if I'm teaching you how to swim and I've kept you in a paddling pool throughout the course of the year, and then all of a sudden it comes to the time when I've got to throw you in the North Sea with the big raging waves, you're going to drown. Whereas if I've taken you from that paddling pool to the Mediterranean Sea, which has calm waters, but you're still having to deal with salty water and waves, all of a sudden the North Sea is not going to be quite as intimidating if you're able to swim excellently in the Mediterranean Sea. So for me, AJ needs to look at the bigger picture here, make a concession, even if it's just financial. That's my take on it. Let me know what you think, ladies and gents. Please don't forget to hit a stiff jab on the like button, a right cross on the subscribe button, and an uppercut on the notifications button. Thanks for watching. Chat to you soon. Take care. God bless.